Sister-in-law demanded money from my husband for a luxury vacation. Instead of paying our sick baby's hospital bills, she said we're young and can make more money, but she won't always have this opportunity. I, 28F, always knew my husband, Stephen, 30M, had a soft spot for his sister, Stacia -22F. She was the baby of the family, the golden child, the one who never really had to take responsibility for much in her life. It wasn't entirely her fault his parents coddled her, and as a result, she grew up with this deep-rooted belief that the world would always rearrange itself to suit her needs. I tolerated it. Mostly because it didn't directly affect us. But that changed when our baby was born. Our little girl came into the world much earlier than expected, and with her early arrival came a slew of medical complications. The first few months were a blur of hospital stays, sleepless nights, and terrifying uncertainty. Every moment, every penny was spent on making sure she got the care she needed. My husband, Stephen, was as devoted as I was. He worked late, picked up extra shifts, and stayed by our daughter's side every second he could. I knew he was exhausted, I was too, but we had no choice. Our child's health was the priority. So when I noticed he had been acting off lately, I assumed it was just stress. He seemed distracted, checking his phone more often than usual, sighing heavily when he thought I wasn't looking. I asked if he was okay, if something was wrong, but he always brushed it off. Just work stuff, he said. I believed him. Until I saw the messages. I wasn't snooping. I was cleaning up the living room when I noticed his phone screen light up on the table. I had no intention of reading his messages until I saw Stacia's name. She had sent him a long string of texts, and out of sheer curiosity, I glanced at the latest one. You're seriously choosing hospital bills over me? I never get to go anywhere. This is my chance, and you know it. Don't be selfish. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I knew Stacia could be entitled, but this? I unlocked his phone with shaking hands and scrolled up to see the full conversation. The further I read, the more my blood boiled. It started with Stacia complaining about how she hadn't taken a proper vacation in years. How she deserved a break after going through her recent stressful breakup. Then came the real request: she wanted Stephen to send her money so she could go on a luxury vacation with her friends. When he told her that we were stretched thin because of our daughter's medical expenses, she didn't back down. Instead, she turned it around on him. You guys are young, you'll make more money. But I won't always have this opportunity. You're really going to let me miss out just because your kid is sick? I had to reread that sentence 3 times to believe she actually said it. Stephen had pushed back, saying that we had financial responsibilities. But instead of respecting that, Stacia doubled down. She told him that family was supposed to support each other and that he was being unfair by prioritizing his own family over his sister. That it wasn't like our daughter was dying, and he could easily cut back on some of the treatments to free up some extra cash. I was shaking with rage. I scrolled up and down, trying to process what I was reading. Stacia, the aunt to my child, was genuinely suggesting that my husband neglect our baby's health so she could go sip cocktails on a beach somewhere. And what made it worse? The fact that my husband didn't immediately shut it down. Sure, he told her no. But he was still entertaining the conversation. He was still letting her guilt him, still justifying himself to her like she had any right to demand this in the first place. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Yelling at Stephen wouldn't fix this. I needed to be smart. So I put his phone back exactly where it was and pretended I never saw it. Please tell me how to deal with this before I rip somebody's head off. Update 1. The next few days were torture. Every time Stephen sighed while looking at his phone, I knew it was because of her. Every time he left the room to take a call, I knew it was her voice on the other end. And every time he looked at me with that exhausted, defeated expression, I knew that deep down, he felt guilty. But the thing was, he shouldn't have been feeling guilty about saying no. He should have been furious that she even asked. I played dumb. I didn't bring it up, didn't let on that I knew anything. Instead, I watched and waited. Stacia, completely oblivious to the fact that I was onto her, kept pushing. She started making passive-aggressive comments in the family group chat, saying things like, "Some people just don't understand the meaning of family loyalty." She posted cryptic rants on social media about how selfishness ruined sibling bonds. And, worst of all, she had the audacity to complain to their mother about how ungrateful Stephen was for all the time she had been there for him growing up. That was the last straw. I had been willing to let this play out quietly. But now, I have a new plan. Because just as I was biting my tongue, waiting for the perfect moment, Stacia made an announcement. She was engaged. And not just engaged, she was throwing a massive engagement party to celebrate. A fancy, over-the-top event with all her friends, extended family, and, of course, her new fiancé, who I had never met. He was the same guy she broke up with. I smiled to myself. This was it. This was the perfect opportunity. Stacia wanted to play games? Fine. I'd play too. And I would make sure she never forgot it. Update 2. The days leading up to Stacia's engagement party felt like torture. Every time I saw Steven on his phone, my stomach twisted with anger. I knew exactly who he was talking to and what she was saying. And the worst part? He still hadn't told me about it. I watched him carefully, waiting for him to confess, waiting for him to say anything that might redeem him. But nothing came. Every night, he climbed into bed beside me, acting as if nothing was wrong, as if his sister hadn't spent the last few weeks trying to convince him to abandon our baby's medical bills in favor of funding her vacation. If I hadn't seen the messages with my own eyes, I might have doubted myself. But I knew the truth. And soon, so would everyone else. The morning of the engagement party, Steven asked me if I was sure I wanted to go. I had to bite back my laughter. Of course, I wanted to go. There was no way I was missing this. I put on my best dress, did my hair, and even made sure to match my jewelry to my outfit. I looked good, and more importantly, I looked calm. Because that was the key to everything I needed to stay calm. I had already printed out the messages. I had taken screenshots of the entire conversation and neatly tucked them into an elegant card. On the front, in gold calligraphy, were the words, "Wishing you a lifetime of happiness." Inside, I had printed out every single one of Stacia's vile messages, the ones where she told my husband to prioritize her vacation over our daughter's health. I didn't add anything. No explanations, no comments. Just the raw, undeniable proof of what she had done. And underneath it all, in the same gold lettering as the front, I wrote, "Wishing your fiancé the best of luck, he's going to need it." I sealed the envelope and slid it into my purse. I was ready. The engagement party was exactly what I expected: extravagant, excessive, and completely self-indulgent. Stacia had spared no expense, and the venue alone must have cost a fortune. I found myself wondering if she had expected Steven to pay for this too. She greeted us with her usual fake enthusiasm, her voice dripping with that insincere sweetness she always used when she wanted something. She hugged Steven first, squeezing him a little too long, and then turned to me with an overly bright smile. I could see the smugness in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she had manipulated Steven into feeling guilty, into keeping her little secret. She had no idea what was coming. We mingled, made small talk, and endured endless conversations about how happy and blessed Stacia was. I watched as she clung to her fiancé, a man who, up until now, had no idea what kind of person he was about to marry. He almost dodged a bullet when they broke up, but looks like I'll have to nip him to bring back his awareness. I almost felt bad for him. Almost. But then Stacia started in on Steven. She leaned in close, lowering her voice so only he could hear, and asked if he had thought more about what they talked about. I didn't need to hear his response to know that she was still pushing. Even now, even with all of this, she still hadn't let it go. She could throw an engagement party this big, but she could have used at least some of it for her so-called luxury vacation. She could pay for it herself or even ask her fiancé. I wonder who paid for this party. I clenched my teeth, forcing myself to remain composed. Not yet. Dinner was served, and soon after, it was time for the speeches. Stacia's fiancé went first, talking about how lucky he was to have found her, how she was the kindest, most selfless person he had ever met. I almost choked on my drink. Then Stacia's mother stood up, talking about how Stacia had always put family first, and how she had such a giving heart. I could barely contain my laughter. And finally, Stacia herself stood up. She beamed at the room, thanked everyone for coming, and then just as I knew she would, she started talking about what family truly means. Family is about supporting each other, no matter what, she said, her voice full of artificial sincerity. It's about knowing that, at the end of the day, we always have each other's backs. I smiled to myself. Perfect. I reached into my purse, pulled out the envelope, and quietly slid it across the table toward Stacia's fiancé. At first, he didn't notice. But when he finally glanced down and saw his name on the envelope, he picked it up with curiosity. Stacia was still speaking, still rambling on about unconditional love, when he opened the card. I watched his face carefully. His smile faltered. His brows furrowed. His eyes flicked across the pages, widening with every word. And then, slowly, he lifted his gaze to Stacia. She must have seen the expression on his face because she hesitated mid-sentence, her confidence wavering. "What's wrong?" she asked, forcing a nervous laugh. He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Steven. "Is this real?" he asked, holding up the card. Steven, who had been blissfully unaware of what I had done, went pale. Stasia's fake smile vanished. "What is that?" she demanded, reaching for the papers. Her fiancé pulled them away before she could grab them. His voice was cold when he told her to explain. She turned to me, her expression a mixture of rage and panic, and accused me of doing something. I tilted my head, feigning innocence, and said I just wanted to make sure he knew what kind of person he was marrying. The room had gone dead silent. People were whispering, craning their necks to see what was going on. Stasia's mother stood up, demanding to know what was happening. Her fiancé ignored her. His entire focus was on Stasia. His voice dripped with disgust as he asked if she really told her brother to stop paying for his sick kid's medical bills so she could go on vacation. Stasia's mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. I leaned back in my chair, enjoying the show. She finally spluttered that it wasn't like that. She was just what? He cut in, shaking his head. What possible excuse could she have for this? She looked around frantically, her eyes darting to Stephen, to her mother, to me, anyone who might come to her defense. But no one did. For the first time in her life, Stasia had no one to bail her out. And I had never felt more satisfied. Stasia's face had gone red, not with embarrassment, but with pure rage. She finally found her voice and snapped that I was making her look bad on purpose, that I had taken things out of context, that I was twisting everything to humiliate her. Her fiancé wasn't buying it. He wasn't looking at me or Stephen. His entire focus was on her, his face dark with disbelief. He shook his head, holding up the messages and asking if she actually expected him to ignore what was right in front of him. Stasia stammered, claiming it was just a joke, something she had said in the moment that I had blown way out of proportion. A joke, her fiancé repeated, his tone dripping with sarcasm. He read one of her own messages aloud, the one where she had called our daughter's medical bills a waste of money and told Stephen to be smart and invest in something that actually mattered, like her dream vacation. I didn't say a word. I didn't need to. Stasia turned to Stephen next, desperate, demanding that he say something in her defense. Stephen, who had remained silent up until now, finally spoke. He looked at Stasia, looking just as stunned as the rest of the room. He admitted that he had been trying to ignore what she had said, that he had given her the benefit of the doubt, but hearing it read aloud like this, seeing the look on her fiancé's face, it made him realize just how wrong it all was. Stasia's eyes widened. She wasn't expecting that. She turned to her mother next, looking for backup, but even her mother looked hesitant. It was clear she wanted to defend Stasia, but how could she? The evidence was right there. The whispers around the room were growing louder. Guests were leaning in, murmuring amongst themselves, some shaking their heads in disgust, others looking downright horrified. Stasia's fiancé looked at her with complete and utter disappointment. He asked how she could be so selfish, so heartless, to even think that a vacation was worth more than a sick child's medical care. Stasia tried again, swearing she didn't mean it, swearing that I had planned this just to ruin her night. Her fiancé scoffed and said I didn't ruin anything she did. She froze. It was at that moment that I knew. She understood just how badly she had messed up. The engagement party was officially ruined. Stasia's fiancé stormed off, pushing past the shocked guests. Stasia chased after him, her voice rising as she begged him to listen, to not let this stupid thing ruin their future. I stayed seated, sipping my drink, watching as the disaster unfolded. Stephen was tense beside me. He finally turned to me, his voice low, asking when I had planned this. I told him it didn't matter. What mattered was that it was done. He exhaled heavily, rubbing his face, but he didn't argue. He knew as well as I did that there was no coming back from this. Stasia's mother stormed back to our table, her heels clicking angrily against the floor. She hissed that I had gone too far, that this was a private matter between siblings, that I should have let them sort it out on their own. I reminded her that Stasia had made it a public issue the second she decided my child's well-being was less important than a luxury trip. She seethed, accusing me of trying to destroy her daughter's happiness. I pointed out that Stasia had done that all on her own. Before she could argue further, Stephen cut in. His voice was firm, final. He told his mother to stop. He told her that Stasia had no right to do what she did and that instead of blaming me, they should be asking themselves why Stasia felt so entitled to other people's money. That shut her up real quick. I saw something shift in Stephen. It's like a switch flicked when the messages were read out loud. He was done making excuses for them. Stasia's mother turned on her heel and marched toward the exit, no doubt to deal with the screaming match happening outside. The guests were still whispering, the atmosphere thick with tension. Some people started making excuses to leave, no longer interested in celebrating. Stephen and I sat there for a moment, taking it all in. I asked him if he was okay. He sighed, shaking his head, saying he didn't know. But he did know one thing: this was it. This was the moment when he finally saw Stacia for who she really was. And he didn't like what he saw. As we made our way toward the exit, I caught sight of Stacia and her fiancé arguing outside. He was furious, his voice shaking as he told her he didn't recognize the woman he had just read about in those messages. Stacia was crying, clutching his arm, swearing that she could explain. I didn't stick around to hear the rest. I had done what I came here to do. That night, Stephen and I sat in silence for a while. He finally broke it, saying he couldn't believe his sister would do something like this and he had let her. I told him he had been blind to it for a long time. She had always been like this, selfish, entitled, cruel. This was just the first time he couldn't ignore it. He nodded, exhaling deeply. He admitted that he felt guilty for not shutting her down sooner, guilty for even entertaining her. I told him it wasn't about guilt, it was about what he did next. Because Stacia wasn't done. She would try to spin this, try to rewrite the story, try to turn it all back on us. And when she did, we had to be ready. Stephen looked at me, his expression serious, and asked if I regretted what I did. I told him no. Not for a second. Because when it came to our child, there was no room for mercy. Update 3, the morning after the engagement party disaster, I woke up to a flood of messages on my phone. Some were from family members who had never bothered to check in before, suddenly interested in hearing my side of the story. Others were from mutual acquaintances, sending screenshots of Stacia's latest social media meltdown. I wasn't surprised. Stacia had gone into full damage control mode. She had posted a long-winded rant about how some people, clearly referring to me, couldn't stand to see others happy and had to ruin special moments out of jealousy and spite. She talked about how she had always been a supportive sil, but I had never accepted her as family. According to her, I had held a grudge against her from the moment I married Stephen, and last night was just my latest attempt to make her miserable. What really made me roll my eyes was how she tried to frame the situation as me weaponizing my child's health to attack her. She claimed that I had twisted a private conversation into something malicious and exaggerated it just to humiliate her. The comment section was divided. Some people clearly saw through her nonsense, calling her out for trying to justify what she had said. Others, mostly her friends and the family members who had always enabled her, rushed to her defense, saying that she had made a mistake but that I had taken it too far. I scrolled for a minute, then locked my phone and set it aside. It didn't matter. Stacia could spin whatever narrative she wanted, but the truth had already come out. And more importantly, the only opinion that really mattered, her fiancé's, was set in stone. Stephen came into the kitchen a little later, rubbing his temples. He had seen the posts too. He muttered that he didn't even recognize his sister anymore. I reminded him that this had always been her, she just didn't have anywhere to hide this time. He sighed, admitting that I was right. But what really shocked him was how their mother had jumped in to defend Stacia online. She had commented under Stacia's post, saying that some people just don't know how to let things go and that family should always come first, no matter what. I laughed at that one. Family should always come first? Except when it came to my baby's medical needs, apparently. Stephen looked exhausted. He ran a hand over his face, saying that he didn't know how to move forward from this. I told him that was up to him, but I had already made my decision. Stacia and her mother were out of my life. I didn't care how they tried to twist things. I didn't care what they told people I wasn't engaging. This wasn't some back and forth fight to me. This was just the natural consequence of their own actions. Stephen sat down and was quiet for a long time. Then he nodded and said he would follow my lead on this. I squeezed his hand. It wasn't an easy thing to let go of family, but sometimes, it was necessary. Later that afternoon, we got a call from Stephen's cousin. Apparently, Stacia's fiancé had officially called off the engagement. He had spent the night thinking about everything, and in the morning, he had confronted her again. Stacia had tried every excuse possible, saying she had been stressed, saying it was just a slip-up, even crying and saying she didn't mean it. But her fiancé wasn't stupid. He saw the way she reacted last night, how she had been more concerned about how she looked rather than what she had done. He told her he didn't want to be with someone who could think like that, let alone say those things so casually. So, the wedding was off. Stephen let out a long breath when he heard the news. He said he felt sorry for her fiancé. I said I didn't. Better he found out now than later. Stacia, of course, was furious. Within hours, she was calling and texting Stephen nonstop, demanding that he fix this. She was convinced that he could smooth things over with her ex-fiancé, that he could somehow explain everything away. Stephen refused to respond. Then she turned to our in-laws, wailing about how I had set her up and how her own brother was betraying her by not defending her. Their mother, of course, was on her side, calling Stephen over and over, leaving long, angry voicemails about how could he do this to his own sister and how dare he choose me over family. I am his family. We have a child together, for God's sake. Stephen ignored the messages without listening to the rest of them. Update 4. Over the next few days, Stacia's posts became more and more desperate. She tried playing the victim, talking about how devastated she was, and how unfair it was that one misunderstanding had cost her everything. When that didn't get the reaction she wanted, she switched tactics and went after me again. She said that if I had an issue with what she said, I should have confronted her privately instead of ambushing her at her own engagement party. She said I had planned it out and waited for the perfect moment to ruin her life. Yes, I did. The thing was, no one was buying it. Most of her friends weren't engaging anymore. A few relatives subtly liked her posts, but no one really came to her defense. She was losing. And she knew it. The last time she tried to reach out, it was through a long, rambling message to Stephen, saying that he was her big brother and that he was supposed to have her back no matter what. Stephen didn't respond. Instead, he finally blocked her. He turned to me afterward, saying that he never thought he'd do something like that to his own sister. I told him that sometimes, people make selfish choices. And Stacia had made hers. This wasn't about family loyalty. This was about basic decency. And Stacia had proven time and time again that she didn't have it. Update 5. A few weeks passed, and life finally settled into a somewhat normal routine again. No more sudden phone calls from Stephen's family. No more guilt-tripping messages. No more desperate attempts from Stacia to spin the story in her favor. She had finally given up. Stephen and I didn't bother checking in on her or seeing what she was up to. We had no interest in reopening that door. She had made it clear what kind of person she was, and we had made it clear that we wanted nothing to do with it. Our focus was exactly where it needed to be, on our little family. The best part of it all? Our baby was doing so well. At our last checkup, the doctor smiled and told us exactly what we had been hoping to hear. Our little one was completely healthy now. Strong. Thriving. Everything we had fought for, every late night at the hospital, every tear, every sacrifice had been worth it. I couldn't even describe the relief that flooded through me at that moment. Stephen squeezed my hand as we sat in the doctor's office, his eyes shining with emotion. I could see how much he had carried the weight of our baby's health on his shoulders, just like I had. But now? That weight was gone. We had done it. We had gotten through the hardest part. And no one could take that away from us. Later that evening, we sat together on the couch, our baby snuggled between us, happily babbling as Stephen gently played with her tiny fingers. He told me he had been thinking a lot lately. About everything that had happened, about how we had handled it, and about how different things could have been if he had let Stacia manipulate him. I told him that I had thought about it too. Because that was the scary part, how easily things could have gone a different way if we hadn't stood our ground. If Stephen had given in to guilt, if I had stayed quiet, if we had let Stacia and his mother make us doubt ourselves, then where would we be right now? Probably in the middle of even more drama. Probably still letting toxic people into our lives. And, most terrifying of all, probably without the security of knowing that our baby had gotten the care they needed. Stephen shook his head and said he didn't even want to think about that possibility. What mattered now was that we had done the right thing. We had fought for our child. And we won. I didn't know what Stacia was doing now, and honestly, I didn't care. Maybe she was still sulking over her broken engagement. Maybe she had already found some other way to manipulate people into giving her what she wanted. Or maybe, just maybe, she had learned something from all of this. But I doubted it. Some people just never changed. A few days later, Stephen got a message from his cousin. It was short. Just a simple "heard the good news about the baby, really happy for you guys." That was it. No mention of Stacia. No mention of the engagement fiasco. Just genuine happiness for us. And that meant more than anything. Because despite everything, the people who truly cared about us were still here. The people who actually mattered. This was all we needed. Not validation from people who had never supported us. Not approval from those who only saw us as a resource to be exploited. Just us. Healthy. Happy. Free. And that was the best closure of all.